Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Beyond Breakfast. Okay, so we are in the middle of, I don't know, we're calling it Rav Dessler, but it's Beyond Breakfast. That's what we're calling it. It's Beyond Breakfast with Rav Dessler. Anyway, so yesterday we left off a midrash that goes through how, based on Rabbi Yerucham, he brings down this midrash that talks about the four kings, and each one of these kings had a unique way of preparing for war. So at the end, we have Chizkiyahu who says, "I'm doing nothing, Hashem. You do the war for me." Okay, this is how the Da'at Chochma Umusar on Yosef deals with this issue. He says, Yosef asked the butler, "Remember me and mention me," and was faulted for this. Though one must do what is within his natural means. Meaning, like we just said up until now, you have to do your hishtadlut, right? You have to have bitachon, but do your hishtadlut. Yosef is punished because he's asking the Sar HaMashke to Hamashkim to go ahead and to support him and make his plea before Paro. The question is why? Right? So he says over here, though one must do it within the natural means, this was considered imperfect because his trust in God should have excluded relying on one who was unlikely to help. Right? Rahavim, vain people. When a person truly trusts, he does not act out of desperation. Yosef knew help comes only from Hashem. But the act of asking someone unreliable was considered inappropriate. This wasn't a critique of Yosef's bitachon, but rather a specific hishtadlut he chose. So basically, the way he's relearning it, the way I always understood it, when Yosef was in the prison, right? Yosef was someone who was always had the deepest bitachon. Can you imagine? You're in jail for how many years was he in jail for? 20-something years, right? 12. He was away for 17 years. Doubled, right? So what is that? That's what's that? 34 years away, and I think 22 years was in jail, right? So he was in jail for about 22 years. Now he's in jail, okay, and he has this nevuah, this prophecy when he was a young kid. Then one day, his brothers are going to come and bow before him, right? So at some point, when you're reflecting 10 years later, you're like, I was a stupid kid. I was a stupid kid. Yosef never gave up on his dreams. And the proof is that he asked for this is his hishtadlut. So that chokhmah is saying that it was bad hishtadlut. When you're making hishtadlut, you have to be strategic about it. Don't just ask anyone for your help. Make sure you're cherry picking the best people, the most responsible people to help you. Don't do random hishtadlut. The more effort you put into clarifying, refining, whatever it is that you're doing, the more hatzlacha you have. So it's like
the more you minimize and make efficient your request,
yes,
the greater is your emunah?
Well, yes, because ultimately we believe it's only Hashem, right? It's only Hashem. But Hashem wants to see something from us, right? We've spoken about this before. What is God's greatest gift to mankind?
Choice.
So part of that choice is to do what with it? What's the choice for?
Faith.
What's that?
Choice to have faith.
The choice to have faith is part of it, but more than just having faith. The faith is part of the humbling process to recognize that it's not me, because it's very simple. There's a famous Rashi I often love to quote. It says, "Lo tov liot adam lavado." It's not good for man to be left alone. Asilu ezer kenegdo. What does Rashi say over there? He says that if you leave Moshe alone, if you leave Adam alone, Adam will say, "Yesh shte rushiyot hen." There are two powers. Elyon. There's a kel be'elyonim, there's a God above, a kel be'tachtonim, right? There's a God above and a God below. If you leave man alone to his own devices, his natural state is to become pompous and arrogant and thinking that he himself is a deity, that he himself is a God. It's actually a really cool clip someone just sent me. I love sci-fi. So there's an old movie from the 70s. I don't know what it's called, but the movie goes, two astronauts end up on some weird planet and they notice this micro city of people, right? These tiny people. And anyway, so they recognize the city, and because this guy is, these are two giants, right? So the people of this micro city start worshiping this astronaut. And one of them is enamored by the idea that he is a god, and he decides he's not leaving, he's staying on the planet. He wants to alter the course. And they build him a monument, and they bring him food, they're changing their output, and so on and so forth. So his friend is telling him, listen, you're crazy, like you gotta get out. He's like, no, I'm staying. Threatens him with a gun. Anyway, he decides to stay. So he's staying, and these little micro people are worshiping him. And all of a sudden, a few days later, he hears the sound of another spaceship coming, and comes out two giants, bigger than him, right? something even bigger than him. And he's saying, no, I'm a God. Oh my God, you're not the God. There's only one God. This is a monotheistic place. Get out of here. So these giants grab this other guy who thought he was a giant and they crush him. And that's the end. I love that story, right? There's always something bigger. The reason why Hashem is the...
It's a very halachic sci-fi movie.
Oh, this is a fascinating, it's a hashkafic. It's more of a hashkafic. Yeah, I think there's a lot of depth to that. 100% a lot of depth to it. So the pasuk is saying, Lo tov liot adam lavado, asil eze kenegdo. God says, if you leave man alone, he starts believing that he is a deity. What does he do? He creates Isha. Isha is here to remind you that you're nothing but a mere mortal. That's how I knew my wife was my wife. Right? She kept reminding me, you're nothing special, you're just a regular guy. And she was a perfect one for me. That's her job. Her job was to deflate my ego, to remind me that I'm nothing but a mere mortal. Yosef, now, so what are we saying? Hishtadlut is like this. Our job is to ask ourselves, how am I working on my bitachon? How am I working on my emunah? What am I doing? So you can say, I'm doing my basic hishtadlut. I'm doing the basic amount of effort. I'm throwing out cards. I'm giving out my resume. I'm doing my thing. But Datu Chokhmah is saying that's not enough. If you're going to go ahead and say, because there's two approaches. One approach is you do nothing. You let go, and let God. That's one approach, right? That's the highest approach. That's the most ideal approach. Not everyone's ready for that, like we saw yesterday with the Malachim, right? With the different kings. David HaMelech was certainly not ready yet, right? 4 different paradigms of how you could go ahead and have bitachon. On the lowest level, there has to be some kind of hishtadlut, and that's what he's saying over here. So if you're doing your hishtadlut because you're not ready to let go and let God, well, how are you putting out your hishtadlut? Make sure it is clear, detailed, refined, and specific. Let's see the Chazon Ish and we'll close up. The Chazon Ish says as follows. He says, we are obligated to evaluate every action before doing it to see if it aligns with the trait of bitachon. Midrash criticized Yosef's request to the butler as lacking trust, adding 2 years to his sentence. Though Yosef knew salvation only comes from Hashem, Yeshuat Hashem, Keref Ayim, we say, since a man's salvation comes in the blink of an eye, since man is obligated to act and not rely on miracles, Yosef felt he should use this opportunity to not to rely on a miracle, because only a miracle he believed would be able to get him out. However, since it involved a person unlikely to help, doing so was a desperate act, not fitting for one who truly trusts. Such an act, not being a duty, is therefore forbidden. The critique is not about Yosef's bitachon, but about that specific unnecessary, unworthy effort.
It was not appropriate for him at his level.
Correct.
Of
Where he was at, and based on how much time he had spent already in this jail cell, he was at a point.
Easy for
He
wasn't thrown into a pit by his
No, I understand that, but you have to understand who Yosef was. Up until this point, Yosef,
he's still a human being.
100% he's a human being.
He asked maybe somebody who could be a vessel to help him. Maybe Hashem put that person there in order to get the Pharaoh's ear.
What we're saying is like this. What we're saying is that ultimately, he was supposed to be released from jail 2 years earlier.
Yes.
Okay, so he's punished. How do you understand his punishment? Why was he punished
That's
then?
what the Midrash says.
Okay, the Midrash says that he was. Midrash.
That's what the Midrash says.
So you're saying?
We don't take the Midrash.
Oh, okay, fine. Okay, you want to take it? It's true, but the Midrash is there to teach you a lesson. So what's the lesson of the Midrash? Forget about if it's true or not. It's irrespective if it's historically accurate. The Midrash is there to teach you a specific lesson. And the lesson of the Midrash is that this concept, it wants you to have a conversation about bitachon. That's what we're talking about it. How do we understand our...
Maybe
Can I try an example?
How?
So Manny, you don't eat cheeseburgers.
No.
If you were to ask for
I
a
do.
cheeseburger,
I do.
if you were to ask for a cheeseburger, that's below your level of observance.
But he has the awareness and the clarity of that. To assume that Yosef.
Yeah. But he has the clarity of that. But if he were to slip and have a cheeseburger, that's below where you are. And I think that's the analogy that you're making.
If
Correct.
Yosef had the clarity, then he wouldn't have asked that.
No, well, Yosef's mistake was that he's like Manuel was like, I'm doing my ishtadlut. Here's an opportunity, right? And here's a guy. So what the Midrash is saying that yes, while it's true, that's a level of ishtadlut, right? The problem is, on his level, he should have realized that this guy is not the messenger. It's like saying, you know what? God can give you money, right? There's lots of ways you can do it. You could walk on the street and find $100 on the street. Is that how you want God to give you money? You know? Or do you want to have it, even if you work for whatever it is, God has thousands of ways of sending you money, right? How do you want it to come to you? You want it to come the most noble means possible, What's that? Lottery ticket's not the most noble means, but certainly it's a means, and it's definitely better than finding a bag on the street with no money on it, whatever it is, and it's yours, right? Opening up your whatever it is and finding something outside. You're like, that's the lowest level. You don't want that. You want to do your hishtalut in a way where you're creating a vehicle that allows you to receive from Hashem in the most noble of opportunities.
I'm just trying to, I appreciate what Nathan is suggesting, I agree with it. I would like to add the perspective that he was thrown into jail as a result of being betrayed by his family. So it's understandable to me why he had to reach out to somebody else. He was pretty desperate at that time. There's a human aspect of it.
Right, there is a human aspect. The one part that you're forgetting is that Yosef is a prophet. Okay, and he's different than everyone else. He's not like a normal guy, and he has this prophecy. He has these dreams that are prophetic, and he knows they're going to come true. He's certain they're going to come true. As a matter of fact, he even understands that while he's in jail, right, he's happy. He's not upset. He's not even upset at the brothers, because after the whole thing happens, and the brothers like, oh my, he says, Ani Yosef. What does he say to them? He says, it's not from you. It's all Hashem. Hashem sent me here. It's not you.
I didn't realize we thought of Yosef as a prophet.
Yeah, of course, he's a Navi. He's one of the Navim. He's a prophet, right? He has this. He has prophecy. He has it in a dream, in the same way Yaakov has it in a dream. But he has prophecy. He understands this is going to come true. Now the question is, how is it going to come true? What's going to be? And by the way, this is exactly what Mordechai says to Esther. She says, if it's fine, you don't want to go, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Hashem will send somebody else. It's going to come. Everything's going to happen at the right time. You just got to figure out if you want to play the game or not. You want to be the main character in the story or not. That's up to you. So, but just to answer the question before, God gives us free will and choice so that ultimately we could become the best version of ourselves. Now, why is that important? Because the greatest gift God could give you really is your own identity. How does something that is infinite create space for something to be unique? So the free will is what allows us to choose to become what we are. Right, so the most refined version of what you are has to do with, well, okay, how are you doing your mitzvot? How are you doing your bitachon? How are you absorbing the world around you? How are you developing yourself? And in that process of all the pain, challenge, and the heartache of living life, and all the growing pains, what's really happening is Hashem is giving you the opportunity to be you. That is the biggest bracha, to be you. In every relationship, every moment you find yourself struggling with something, that is all God's way of saying, I love you, choose well, because you're going to have the most amazing opportunity to be you. Like the names he was talking about, right? I'll end with this. So we know that Moshe has like 7 different names, right?
I thought he had 10.
He has this one midrash that says, Rashi quotes 7, there's another midrash that said he has 10. Yekutiel, he has Avi Soche, which is like the father of all the seers, which is a much cooler name than Moshe. Moshe means I drew you out of the water. You know, it's like, what's that? But what's interesting is that Midrash says that God chooses to call him Vikra, who? El Moshe. Not Avi Socho, not Yekutiel, not all the other beautiful names that he has. And the question is why? Why Moshe? Right? So the answer is simply because that was the name that Batya gave him. Right? And Batya's receiving Moshe was an act of sacrifice. By her. And by the way, more than that, we will argue, since Batya raised him, I would imagine that so much of his own personal sacrifice of going out and being mindful of other things, like the carrying the sheep on his shoulders, was an extension of her willingness to sacrifice for him.
Was she punished by her father at any point or no?
Unclear. But we know that she makes it into Israel. She's buried in Israel. She survives the 40 years in the desert. Right?
So she's part of the Arab world.
She wasn't part of Arab world.
She's not Jewish.
She became Jewish at what's it called? At Har Sinai.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Even the Arab converted at Har Sinai.
I thought everyone in the desert died except for 2.
No, that's not true. From the men. From the men.
Batya made it to Eretz Yisrael.
Yeah, Batya makes it to Eretz Yisrael.
Do we know where she's buried?
Yeah, she's buried in the north. There's actually a place in Tveria. I actually bring my groups there.
That's where Miriam is.
Everyone's buried in Tveria.
What?
Miriam is in Tveria.
Miriam's also buried in Tveria. They're not buried far away from each other.
Everyone made it into Eretz Yisrael.
Miriam is in the Kinneret.
Miriam's body was born to Israel, yeah.
What about
She was allowed to be born. Aaron is buried in Jordan. We know where that is today. right? It's right. It's about an hour walk away from Petra. I've had friends who've gone there. It's actually really cool. And Moshe, we have Har Naval. We know where the mountain is. We just don't know where he's buried. But Miriam is buried in Eretz Yisrael. Anyway, I want to wish you all an amazing week. Bezat Hashem will continue next week. Have a great day, everybody.